In recent years, a growing number of Christians have begun celebrating the biblical Jewish holiday of Sukkot, also known as the Feast of Tabernacles. There's even a large annual celebration for this holiday in Jerusalem that draws Christians from all over the world. But why are so many drawn to this biblical festival? And what does Sukkot have to do with the Apostle Paul? Well, biblically, Sukkot is both a harvest festival and a commemoration of Israel's dependence on God as they lived in temporary shelters after leaving Egypt. And because of its emphasis on gratitude, it's also called Zaman Simchatenu, the season of our joy. But here's something else. In the prophets, Sukkot takes on a bigger global meaning. Zechariah 14 envisions a day when all nations will stream to Jerusalem to worship the God of Israel at Sukkot. In other words, the Feast of Tabernacles became a vision of ingathering, not only for Israel's crops, but for the nations themselves. Now, what does this have to do with Paul? Well, in his letters, Paul repeatedly quotes scripture about the nations worshiping the God of Israel. A big example is found in Romans 15, where he strings together texts from the Psalms and Deuteronomy and Isaiah. So why did he pile up all these passages? Well, it's because Paul saw his mission as the unfolding of a prophetic theme of the nations turning from idols to honor Israel's God alone. Now, Paul never directly quotes Zechariah's vision of the nations celebrating Sukkot in Jerusalem. But even without citing it, his mission runs on the same track. Paul's calling centered on gathering the nations to worship the God of Israel, and he was convinced that Christ had set in motion the time the prophets envisioned when Israel and the nations would worship God together, just as Zechariah described. So when Paul traveled across the Roman world, planting communities of Gentile Christ followers, he wasn't inventing something new. He believed he was participating in the great ingathering of the nations that Sukkot symbolized. So was Paul's mission connected to the Feast of Tabernacles? I think the answer is yes. As a Jewish teacher of Torah to the Gentiles, Paul likely continued to celebrate Sukkot each year, and he likely encouraged his Gentile disciples to share in its meaning. But even beyond the tangible observances, Paul saw in Sukkot a prophetic vision unfolding through his mission, a vision of Israel and the nations gathered together to worship the God of Israel. Now, why does this matter today? Well, it matters because our world is so often divided by misunderstanding and suspicion. However, Sukkot reminds us that the Jewish prophets envisioned a future in which diverse peoples would worship together in joy and faithfulness. Paul's mission was built on that same vision, that the God of Abraham is not only the God of Israel, but of the nations also. And perhaps this helps explain why Christians celebrating Sukkot today, sometimes even alongside Jewish people, is more than just a curiosity. It can be seen as a living expression of the respect, unity, and shared hope envisioned by both Zechariah and the Apostle Paul. Hey, if you'd like to learn more about Paul and his Jewish and Greco-Roman context, check out my book, The Weird Apostle. You can find it on Amazon. And don't miss out on any of my new content by subscribing wherever you're watching or listening. And if you'd like to learn more about how to build bridges between Jews and Christians, check out bridgebuildersforum.com.